For a society to remain stable, it must maintain a massive lower class. Why? This isn't about morality, it's about mechanics. To function, a system needs a crowd that never stops producing, a crowd that spends the best years of their lives trading time for labor. They produce the goods, and then they are conditioned to consume the very products they just made. The essential condition? They must stay motivated to own assets, while those assets are kept forever, just out of reach. You might live better than your parents. You can travel, buy nice meals, enjoy the latest gadgets, but actual wealth, real ownership, that's becoming a ghost. And so, you work harder. You run faster to reach a finish line that's being moved further away. That is how the engine keeps turning. That is how the system survives. Welcome to the invisible driver, where uncomfortable truths are quietly examined. Let's begin with a question that most people are afraid to ask. Why? In the wealthiest nation on earth, does poverty still exist? The answer isn't a failure of the system. The answer is that the system is working perfectly. Stability, you see them as a luxury bought with the labor of the many, for a society to function, for the streets to be cleaned, for the warehouses to ship your packages, and for the cafes to serve your morning brew. The system requires a massive, constant, and predictable lower class. This is the stability paradox. A society cannot remain stable if everyone is at the top, if everyone has $50 million. Who is left to maintain the infrastructure? The engine requires friction to move. And in our world, that friction is human need. Look at the economy in America today. We see millions of people working 2 jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. They are told that if they just work harder, they will climb the ladder. But the rungs of that ladder are being coated in oil. The pressure isn't an accident, it is a design choice. When you are worried about next month's rent, you don't have the luxury of questioning the architects of the building. You are too busy keeping the building standing. The lesson here is simple. The system doesn't want you to fail, but it absolutely cannot afford for you to succeed too much. It needs you in the sweet spot of survival, comfortable enough not to revolt, but desperate enough to never stop running. But survival is only the first layer of the cage. To truly keep a bird from flying, you don't just lock the door. You make the bird forget that it ever had wings. And that leads us to our second point, the transition from being an owner to being a permanent guest in your own life. Number 2, the modern serfdom, ownership versus subscription. In the past, being a serf was simple. You lived on a lord's land, you worked his fields, and you gave him a piece of your life in exchange for a place to sleep. The chains were visible. The walls were made of stone. Today, the stone walls are gone, but the landlord has simply moved into your smartphone. Welcome to the Rentership Society in modern America. The dream of ownership is being replaced by a monthly bill. You don't own your house. The bank does, for 30 years. You don't own your car. You lease it. You don't even own the music you listen to, or the software you use to work. Everything is a subscription. This is the new feudalism. The architects of the system realize that if you own nothing, you are never truly free to leave. When you own your home, you have a fortress. When you have a subscription, you have a permission slip. And permissions can be revoked. Think about it. The system encourages you to choose convenience over equity. Why save for years to buy when you can pay a small fee and use it now? It sounds like freedom, but it is a trap of perpetual dependency. The contrast is staggering. The old serf knew he was a slave to the land. The modern serf believes he is a consumer, enjoying the latest trends, while every month his bank account is drained by 1,000 invisible leeches, leaving him with exactly zero at the end of the road. The lesson is this: real wealth is not about what you can use. Real wealth is about what you own, that no one can take away. If you can't stop paying and still keep it, you don't own it. You are just borrowing it from the system. But why do we accept this? Why do we sign these contracts so willingly? The answer lies in the heavy weight of the anchor that keeps us from sailing away. And that anchor is forged in the fires of debt. If the Rentership Society is the cage, then debt is the anchor. And in America, we forge that anchor early. Think about the average student at 18. Before they even understand how the world works, they are encouraged to sign a contract for $50, $80, or $100,000. They call it an investment in the future. The system calls it collateral. By the time you graduate, you aren't just a professional. You are a debtor. You cannot afford to explore. You cannot afford to fail. And you certainly cannot afford to say no to a job you hate. You have been successfully neutralized before your career even began. Then comes the credit card, the plastic illusion of wealth. Let's look at the math, the cold, hard math. If you have a balance of $5,000 at a 20% interest rate, and you only pay the minimum, it will take you nearly 20 years to pay it off. 20 years. That is 7,000 days of your life, dedicated to paying for a meal you ate or a shirt you wore 2 decades ago. Is that money? Or is it time? The system doesn't want your cash. It wants your years. It wants the certainty that you will wake up tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after, and sell your energy for a paycheck that is already spent. The lesson is brutal. Bad debt is the gravity that keeps you in the lower class. It is the invisible chain that makes you a safe citizen, because a man with a mortgage and a car payment is a man who will never revolt. But how do they keep us happy in these chains? How do they stop the mind from realizing it is being drained? They do it by keeping the eyes busy, by drowning our senses in a digital ocean where the truth is buried beneath a mountain of noise. And that is the art of manufacturing consent. Why is it that in an era of infinite information, we feel more confused than ever? The answer is simple. The system no longer needs to censor the truth. It only needs to drown it in a sea of irrelevant noise. Welcome to the digital sedative. Hollywood, Netflix, and the endless scroll of social media. We call it entertainment. The system calls it manufacturing consent. Think about the algorithm, that invisible architect, watching your every move, measuring your every heartbeat. It doesn't care if you are happy or sad. It only cares that you are occupied. As long as you are arguing about a movie star done or outraged by the latest viral trend, you aren't looking at the bars of your cage. This is the great sedative. It teaches you how to think, how to desire, and what to value. It paints a picture of success that requires you to spend, and a picture of failure that makes you afraid. When you are exhausted from a day of trading your time for debt, the system hands you a remote control. It tells you, rest, you've earned it. But you aren't resting. You are being programmed. The mistake we make is believing that entertainment is a break from reality. It isn't. It is the factory where your reality is being built. The lesson? Protect your attention as if it were your life. Because it is. Every minute you spend in a digital trance is a minute you aren't building your own map. But there is a darker side to this tranquil sea. The system doesn't just watch you, it trains you to watch each other. It turns your neighbors, your friends, and even your family into unpaid guards of the status quo. And that leads us to the most effective prison ever designed: the social credit system of the West. Most people look at foreign regimes and shudder at the idea of a social credit score. They think, thank God I live in a free country. But they are looking for a government official in a uniform, while the real warden is sitting right next to them. In the West, we have built a decentralized prison. The bars aren't made of steel. They are made of likes, shares, and the terrifying power of the unfollow button. This is the social credit system of the West. It is a game of psychological survival. The system defines what is acceptable, and then it steps back and lets the crowd do the policing. Think about cancel culture. It isn't about justice. It is about the enforcement of the norm. Imagine a man who dares to speak a truth that contradicts the popular narrative. He doesn't get arrested. Instead, he wakes up to find his digital identity erased. His friends go silent. His professional network vanishes. The crowd, acting as the immune system of the structure, isolates the infection until it is neutralized. The architects realize something brilliant. You don't need a secret police if you can make every citizen a volunteer informant. We monitor each other. We perform for each other. We censor our own thoughts. Because the fear of being cast out is more painful than the desire to be free. The lesson is a hard one to swallow. If your opinions are the same as everyone else's, you aren't a leader. You are a prisoner who has fallen in love with his cell. True independence of thought requires the courage to be invisible to the crowd, because when you stop seeking their likes, you stop being their slave. But even if you escape the social pressure, you still have to face the math. The system has one more way to keep you in line, a way that feels like a natural law, but is actually a carefully calibrated trap. It is the math of your bank account, and it is designed to keep you at zero. The greatest lie ever sold is that hard work leads to wealth. It doesn't. Hard work leads to stability, and stability is the engine of the system. Let's look at the math. The system is calibrated to ensure that your wages always lag behind the cost of living. They call it inflation. I call it a tax on your time. If your salary increases by 3%, but the cost of housing and food increases by 5%, you didn't get a raise. You got a pay cut in the form of your life's energy. The system keeps you in a perpetual state of just enough. Enough to eat, enough to pay the bills, but never enough to buy your freedom. There is a profound difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich is about how much you earn. Being wealthy is about how much you own and how much of that ownership works while you sleep. Most people are chasing a bigger paycheck. They think, if I only made 6 figures, I would be free. But the system is ready for them. Higher taxes, lifestyle creep, the urge to buy a status symbol to prove they made it. They become richer prisoners in a more expensive cell. The math of poverty is simple. If you trade time for money, you have a ceiling. You are a battery that eventually runs out of juice. And when you are empty, the system simply replaces you with a fresh one. The lesson? Stop working for a number. Start working for an asset. An asset doesn't need to sleep. An asset doesn't get tired. Wealth is the ability to walk away from the table and know that the table is still serving you. But why is it so hard to start? Why do we feel so exhausted? Even when we aren't moving. Because the system doesn't just want your money, it wants your momentum. It hates when you have time to think, and that is why. It created the cult of the grind. Toisitrian kaifan tubay kuakich of hanai. Chung tasif hantikli dotay sao suban ron kong paila mo jutstin. Malamo chien tuat kim soat kwa hetong je tritio ka nang tu duijok lab. 11 Lab Script, English. The system is terrified of a man with nothing to do. Have you ever wondered why society worships the grind? Why do we wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor? The hustle culture isn't a movement for your success. It is a defense mechanism for the system. Here is the paradox. A busy mind is a compliant mind when you are working 60 hours a week, chasing a side hustle, and managing a chaotic schedule. You are too tired to look up. You are too preoccupied to ask, who wrote the rules I am following? Free time is the ultimate weapon of the individual, because in silence, thoughts begin to form in the gaps between the labor. Questions begin to rise, the people who write the laws, the architects of the engine. They don't want you to have white space in your calendar. They want you to fill it with productivity or entertainment, anything to keep you from the danger of deep thought. Think about the modern workplace. Even your break is filled with noise. The system has convinced you that doing nothing is a sin, that being idle is a failure. But being idle is when the soul begins to realize it is in a cage. The lesson is this. The most radical thing you can do is reclaim your time. Not to be more productive for someone else, but to be more conscious of yourself. True power doesn't come from working faster. It comes from having the space to choose your direction. But once you have the time, what do you do with it? Most people use their time to run in circles. They work harder. Instead of working differently, they try to win a game that was designed for them to lose, to escape. You must stop playing the game of time and start playing the game of scale. And that is where everything changes. If you want to escape the engine, you must stop being a gear. A gear only moves when the machine moves, and it wears out over time. The secret to freedom isn't working more hours. It is breaking the link between your time and your income. In the system's eyes, you are a unit of labor. 1 hour of work equals 1 unit of pay. This is a linear trap, and it has a hard ceiling. To break out, you must move from the linear to the exponential. You must learn the art of scaling. Think about a software engineer who builds an app, or a creator who builds a digital course. They work hard once, they build the asset once, but that asset can be sold to 100 people, or 1 million people, while they are eating, while they are traveling, or while they are sleeping. The system hates this, because it cannot control your clock anymore. Compare this to a surgeon, one of the most respected roles in society, but still a prisoner of time. If the surgeon doesn't show up to the operating room, the income stops. He is still trading his life's energy for a paycheck. Even if that paycheck is large, he is a high-level gear, but he is still a gear. The lesson is this: you don't get wealthy by being the best worker. You get wealthy by owning the system that workers use. You must shift your position in the ecosystem. Stop being the one who sells the hour, and start being the one who sells the solution, whether it is a platform, a product, or a brand. If it can grow without you being physically present, you have found the exit. Scaling is the only way to buy back your life, but be careful. Building a system requires a different kind of mind. It requires you to unlearn everything the school system taught you. It requires a fundamental shift in how you see yourself, and that shift, starts with the map inside your head. Number 9, the cognitive shift. Building your own map. The final barrier then is not the bank, and it is not the boss. It is the map you carry in your mind. Most people are navigating life using a map drawn by someone else, a map that leads you from the classroom, to the cubicle, to the retirement home. To build your own path, you must first burn the old map. The shift starts with one realization: you are not a worker. You are a creator of value. Stop asking, who will hire me? And start asking, what problem can I solve for 1,000 people? Step 1 is the accumulation of intellectual capital. In the modern world, knowledge is the only currency that the system cannot inflate away. Learn the skills that schools don't teach: sales, psychology, systems design, and the leverage of AI. These are the tools of the architect. Step 2 is building your network capital. The system wants you to compete with your neighbor for crumbs. The wise man collaborates with the few to build the bakery. Surround yourself with those who have already stepped outside the cage. Your environment dictates your altitude. The lesson is this: true freedom is not the ability to buy anything you want. True freedom is the ability to say no to anything you don't want. It is the mental sovereignty to look at a trend, a debt, or a standard of success and feel absolutely nothing. When you no longer need the system's approval, the system loses its power over you. You are no longer a piece on the board. You are the one watching the game. This journey is quiet, and it is lonely. There will be no applause for your awakening. In fact, those who are still asleep may resent you for it, but the view from the outside is worth every moment of the struggle. We have traveled a long way today, from the mechanics of the cage to the keys in your hand. Now, there is only one thing left: the choice. We have looked behind the curtain. We have seen the paradox of stability, the anchor of debt, and the digital sedatives that keep the world in a trance. The architects of this system are not evil. They are simply efficient. They have built a world that functions on your compliance, a world that trades your infinite potential for a finite paycheck. But now, you know, and knowledge is a heavy burden. You can no longer claim ignorance. Every dollar you spend, every hour you trade, and every like you chase is a vote for the version of the future you want to live in. The system will continue to turn. The engine will continue to roar. The question is, will you be the fuel, or will you be the driver? True awakening is not a loud protest. It is a quiet, consistent, and deliberate withdrawal from the game. It is the moment you realize that the cage door was never locked. It was only waiting for you to stop leaning against it. You cannot change the world until you change your position within it. Stop being a resource. Become a force. The chains are optional. The map is yours to draw. The only thing the system cannot control is a mind that has decided to be free. Choose wisely, because time is the only currency that never comes back. Thank you for listening to The Invisible Driver, where uncomfortable truths are quietly examined.